Good afternoon to everybody who has already joined us. We are going to give it about 30 more seconds to let the rest of our attendees get logged on to the webinar, and then we'll begin. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Webinar Wednesday, where we share best practices and success stories for STEM, technical education, and workforce training. My name is Melissa Martin. I'm with ATS Lab Midwest, and today I'm joined by Matt Kirkner, and we're talking all about the step-by-step guide to deploying your employee training program. This is part of our 10-session mini-series, all focused on industrial workforce training. You can head over to our website to catch up on any of the past episodes from that session. Or if you want to catch up on any of the past webinars we've been doing every Wednesday for the past year and a half, you can do so on YouTube. Just search Lab Midwest, you'll find our channel there. And we have a playlist where we have a year and a half worth of excellent topics covering all things STEM, tech ed, workforce training, just incredible technologies and incredible guests that we know you'll love to hear from. So check out our past webinars there. We are recording the session, so anybody who registered for today's webinar will receive this recording later this week. So keep an eye out on your email inbox for that. And as always, we welcome you to share this with anybody else that would be interested in this topic. Finally, we are taking questions from the audience today. So if you are curious about workforce training and what it takes to deploy a solid program for employees, go ahead and type those into that Q&A box. We've reserved some time at the end to pose those to Matt. All right, that's it for me at this time. I will turn things over to Matt.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Welcome back, everybody. Hard to believe it's been almost a year and a half since we started this series, as Melissa mentioned, Webinar Wednesday, where we're here every Wednesday, and we'll continue to be. Welcome to the month of September. We're in full swing. We actually had our first Webinar Wednesday of the month last week, Wednesday, so we're in full swing with the new school year. By and large, things are opened up. We're seeing people out in the field. It's a great, great feeling, but it's great to have all of you with us virtually here on Webinar Wednesday this week as we talk about a step-by-step guide to deploying your employee training program. So there's a pretty specific sequence of events that we go through when we're working with industrial employers who are training their incumbent workforce. This is really important stuff. As you've heard us say before, if you look back into the 1970s, the average industrial employee received 100 hours a year of skills-based training provided by their employer every single year. And no wonder we built such an amazing industrial workforce here in the United States of America. Well, sad to say we don't do it quite the same way anymore. Most industrial employers are training their people about 5 hours a year. And most of that training is what is mandated by OSHA. So if we are going to build the workforce of the future, we need to get back into the habit of training our own people. And today we'll talk about a perfect strategy, step-by-step, for implementing a training program for your incumbent workers. So step one in our guide is this: do not try DIY. We all know DIY stands for do it yourself. We talk to industrial employers from time to time who say we want to do an industrial training program. We are going to build it on our own. Some of them do an amazing job at building their own internal training program. And if you've done that, more power to you, and we're not taking anything away from you. That is awesome that you've been able to do that. By and large, though, most employers who try to create their own learning program on their own fail in the process of doing so. And there are a variety of reasons for that. We'll talk about some of those, but the first recommendation we have is work with an expert, because I can tell you what happens when somebody says we're going to design our own incumbent training program. We tell them best of luck, let us know if we can help you, and then we wait about 6 months, because we know after 6 months there's going to be an email that lands in our inbox, there's going to be a ring on our mobile phones with the customer looking like this. Why is that? It is because setting up an industrial training program is hard. It is a lot of work. We have to figure out what we want our people to learn. We have to build a curriculum around that. There's a certain way to make competencies stick through learning and a certain way that prevent them from sticking. We have to figure out how we're going to do hands-on skills. We're going to have to figure out who our subject matter experts are. How are we going to deliver that learning? All of these things we have to figure out when we're putting together an industrial training program. Now, let me tell you, as somebody who has run and owned businesses for over a quarter century, when I have to do my tax returns, I don't sit down at the computer and figure out all my debits and credits and put them into the computer and figure out my own taxes. What do? I hire an accountant. I hire a CPA to do that. Now, it may cost me a little bit more money, but the truth of the matter is my time is way better spent running my business than trying to figure out my tax return. If I have a legal question, I do not drive to the local university law library and research the answer to my question, going through hundreds and thousands of volumes of legal works to try and figure out the answer. What do? I call a lawyer, and the lawyer answers the question for me based on and using their expertise. On an hourly basis, it costs me a little bit more money than it would have to study the problem myself. But there again, I save all that time of doing it and get to put it to better use. The same is true of industrial training. When you're setting up your industrial training program, there are people who do this for a living. There are people whose job it is to be experts in industrial learning and industrial training. Use them. You will save yourself tons and tons of headaches, and you will expedite the process of implementing your industrial training program. Believe it or not, when an industrial employer asks us, how long will it take you to set up my program? They are shocked when we tell them we can do it in a matter of days. We can move as fast as they want to. Literally, if I get a call on Monday, we can have a plan in place and a program in place by Friday, if they're willing to move that fast. That is how quickly we can set up a program like this. Number two, you are unique in some ways and not others. Every single manufacturer is unique. Every one of them has their own way of doing something. The more specific their niche, the more specific their market, the more creative they may have had to be in terms of creating their particular manufacturing process. So no two manufacturers are alike, and no single industrial training program is going to train every single competency exactly the way that your organization does this. But I can tell you, when we sit down with an industrial employer, a lot of times they will say, Matt, you don't understand. Our manufacturing operation is unique. The way we do things is specific to us. We have technology that nobody else uses. And my answer is always, I'm sure you do, but my guess is the majority of your technology is very, very similar to what we might see with other manufacturers. So think about this. When we are putting together an industrial training program, fluid power is fluid power. If you're using pneumatics, if you're using hydraulics, that is the same almost regardless of what business you're in. Same thing for electricity. Electrical circuits haven't changed since we studied them eons and eons ago, or at least centuries ago. Teaching basic electricity is not difficult if we do it the right way, and all of it manifests itself the same way in every manufacturer. Relays are relays, programmable logic controllers are programmable logic controllers, motors are motors, gears are gears, shafts are shafts, and yes, excuse me, an inch is the same length in every single manufacturer. And if we're training people how to read blueprints, if we're training people how to measure, measurement is done almost exactly the same thing, same way. Those blueprints and blueprint symbols and schematics are almost all identical. Sensors are sensors, and you get the picture. So we can take all of these subcomponents of manufacturing technology, train our people on them, and by the time we're done, we have a turnkey solution that trains on all of the competencies that are seen in our manufacturing plant. Now, somebody may have to take that person out to your shop floor and show them how those technologies manifest themselves in your specific operation. But the truth of the matter is the technologies and the base component technologies are the same no matter what manufacturing company we walk into. And believe me, we have walked into thousands of them. So next, we have to figure out who to train. Sometimes we're training our entire workforce, and sometimes we're just training a segment of the workforce. Let me give you some examples of groups of people that we spend a lot of time putting training programs together for. A lot of times folks want to put together an orientation program for new employees, give them maybe 15 or 20 hours of e-learning about advanced manufacturing technology, maybe a little bit of safety, maybe a little bit of lean manufacturing, and train them on basics of manufacturing technology. We get a lot of folks that say, you know what, I want to take my machine tenders, those people loading and unloading my machines, and turn them into operators and then go hire a new person for that machine tender position. Sometimes we'll take those operators and turn them into technicians, electromechanical technicians, automation technicians, electrical technicians, and so on. And we may take an operator and turn them into a frontline supervisor, and they need to have more of a base understanding of all of the technologies in the manufacturing operation. We can set up a training program to do that. We have a lot of clients that come to us and say, I have a person working in maintenance, a maintenance technician 1 that I want to turn into a maintenance technician 2, or I want to take a maintenance technician 2 and make them a maintenance tech 3, and so on. So we can create a whole continuum of training across every one of those positions. And as students complete coursework in those areas, as they pass their post quizzes, as they pass their credentialing, they can be promoted or at least be eligible for promotion to that next level. And then we can backfill with somebody who is training for the previous position. Sometimes we'll talk about upskilling electricians and millwrights. Suffice it to say, if there's a position on your manufacturing floor, on your industrial floor, in the world of process control, in the world of advanced manufacturing, we can put together a program to train those individuals, to train those incumbent workers. So doesn't really, sky's the limit in terms of where we start, but we do have to determine who we are going to train. The next thing we need to think about is, what do we want them to learn? What do we want to train them on? The truth of the matter is that with just one of our partners, we can deliver 300 different courses and 3,000 hours of content. That's one partner. We have 17 of them. But think about this, 300 courses, 3,000 hours of content in advanced manufacturing, electrical systems, electronics, measurement and gauging, one of the most popular things that we get in terms of requests from industrial employers. The whole world of fluid power, hydraulics, pneumatics, mechanical drives, which are your shafts, your pulleys, your chains, your gears, and so on. Then we get into automation and mechatronics, putting all these technologies together, understanding basic and advanced robotics, reading blueprints, reading drawings, understanding dimensioning, understanding symbols, getting into manufacturing processes and materials. Maybe you're in the world of powder coating. We have coursework for that. Maybe you are in the world of heat treating. We have coursework for that. We can train specifically on gaskets. We can train specifically on fasteners. We get into all of the process control stuff. So now we are talking about temperature and pressure and level and flow and analytics, all the things I used to work on when I ran a huge manufacturing company in the metal finishing market, all the things we're using when we're in food production, all the things that we're using when we are in waste treatment. So those are just some of the competencies, and the list keeps going. Industry fundamentals like shop math is really popular. We get into machining, whether that's a FANUC control, another control, green energy, structural engineering, and finally, all the aspects of lean manufacturing, quality, workplace effectiveness, and safety. Now we ask ourselves, how awesome would it be if somebody had all 3,000 hours of this knowledge? And the answer would be, that would be incredible. But at 100 hours a year, 2 hours a week, which is what we recommend for an ongoing training program, it would take an employee 30 years to get through all that content. And if we hire somebody when they're in their early 20s, none of us wants to wait until they're in their early 50s until they have all the competencies that we want them to have. So we have to determine which of those course areas, which of those competencies are most important for every level of employee in terms of how they manifest themselves on the shop floor and in our manufacturing operation. So deciding what to train is really important. And what we do with that information once we have it is something we'll share in another step in just a minute. But the next thing we need to do is to pick an administrator. The truth of the matter is that to have a subject matter expert at a manufacturing plant overseeing training is awesome. If we have somebody that understands all those technologies we just talked about and can help oversee and facilitate the training, that is awesome. But most manufacturing companies don't have a person like that. And if they do, their highest and best use in manufacturing is on the shop floor, not necessarily in a training room training other employees. So we can do a lot of this with an e-learning platform. We can do a lot of this with flexible hands-on skills, but in order to do that, somebody needs to oversee the program. So we have to pick an administrator. Sometimes this is somebody in HR, sometimes this is somebody in operations, and they are the person that is going to facilitate the learning, that is going to make sure that the individual students have their e-learning codes, that they're completing their assigned learning as they are supposed to, that they are getting their questions answered. If they have a question on how to access the learning management system, how to access a course, how to do a pre-quiz, how to do a post-quiz, or maybe they get hung up along the way and have a question that needs to be answered. This person does not need to be a subject matter expert. They need to understand the process of training, and they need to know who on our team or our partners team to go to if they get a question that is beyond them. So having somebody on the team that is designated as the administrator, and usually this is a 2 or 3 hour a week job, it's not a full-time job. So we're carving that out of somebody's other responsibilities. Again, usually in HR or operations, you have to choose somebody who's going to administer the program, who's going to oversee the training, and who is going to administer the learning management system. So now we get to what we call custom courses. So we talked about the importance of deciding what to train. 3,000 hours of content, 300 different courses. No one individual is going to go through all of those. So we figure out which of those courses apply to which individual, and then we can create a custom pathway for every one of those learners. So people ask me, how long does this take? I mean, if you were to come into our operation, if you were coming to our conference room and we were going to sit down with a couple of our supervisors, maybe a couple of maintenance technicians, maybe a shop floor operator, talk about the technologies that we're using in our specific manufacturing operation, talk about how important they are, talk about where they're used, and they create a custom plan by employee. How long does that take? And I'll usually answer with a question that says, how long do you think it should take? And when people answer that question, they will usually say, well, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 weeks. And my answer is, we can do it in an afternoon, literally in an afternoon. And that is my point about creating the right relationship with the right partner. Because if you're working with somebody that understands the content and understands manufacturing, putting those two pieces together can go really, really quickly. So we can literally create a custom pathway on a position by position, or sometimes even an employee by employee basis in an afternoon. That's all the longer that it takes for us to be able to do that. We're going to talk in a minute about why being able to match those courses to individual positions is really important. But before we do that, let's talk about hands-on skills. Many of us who found our way into manufacturing, in fact, most of us who found our way into manufacturing did so because we are hands-on kinesthetic learners. We love working with our hands. We love creating things. We love that feeling of looking back over our shoulder at the end of the day at a pile of parts that we built and being able to say, I made that. We love the dignity and the creativity and the positive energy that comes from working in manufacturing. But the truth is, we are hands-on kinesthetic learners. Oftentimes they're not, and we're not great classroom learners, which is why there is value in taking highly interactive e-learning content, which meets that learner where they are in an interactive fashion, and combining it with hands-on skills training. Now, we don't have to have hands-on skills training. I earned 2 Smart Automation Certification Alliance credentials just doing it all online. And I can tell you that my command of manufacturing technology, even for somebody who spent a career in manufacturing, advanced exponentially through that process and through that experience, even though it was all online, even though it was all theory and interactive learning and knowledge checks, and most important, simulations and virtual simulations of actually doing physical work, which resonated really well with me as a hands-on kinesthetic learner. The truth of the matter is that if we can get an additional part of the training, which is hands-on training, we're going to be that much further ahead with most of our learners. And so figuring out where the hands-on training opportunities and experiences are most important, where they will have the most leverage and create the most benefit for the company, that's really important. People ask me oftentimes, how do we do that? How do we go about figuring out which of these programs and which of these hands-on trainers are best for us? And my answer is kind of the same way we do it in manufacturing when we want to improve a process. When we want to improve a process, a manufacturing process, we don't lock ourselves in our office and think about it and come up with the next best solution. What do? We go to the Gemba, we go out onto the shop floor, and we work with the people who are actually doing the work and ask them how they're experiencing their job. And if they could change one thing to make the process more efficient, to make it safer, to make it yield more quality parts, what would they do? Ask the people who actually do the work. And when we say, what hands-on trainers do we need in a program? Our answer is, let's not figure that out for ourselves. Let's ask the learners. Let's ask the operator. Let's ask the maintenance technician. let's ask that new employee as they're going through the e-learning, where do they feel they would get the most benefit from a hands-on trainer? Now, this surprises industrial employers when they ask us this, because a lot of times they will expect us to say, well, you need to buy this, or you need to invest $500,000 in that, or you need to build this lab. If a company has the resources available to do that, we can do a phenomenal job of coaching them through exactly where they can put that money to best use. But the truth of the matter is many companies don't. And we can't afford to have a company acquire or purchase a hands-on training system that doesn't add value. So what do? We start by letting the learners experience the e-learning for a period of time and let them tell us where they feel the hands-on training would be the most beneficial. That has two benefits. Number one is we know it's going to hit the mark because the people who are actually doing the work, the people who are actually participating in the training told us. And then guess what? When that hands-on learning system arrives at the manufacturing facility, they know it was them that suggested it. And we can tell the company employees that come afterwards, don't take our word for it. Take your coworker on the shop floor's word for it. They're the individuals that said this would be helpful for you. So that's number 7, hands-on skills. Number 8, and we've talked about this in a previous edition of Webinar Wednesday, we need to start the learning where the knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. Here's why that is important for every individual employee, even employees with the same titles, even employees with the same amount of experience, even employees in the same companies. They are going to have different levels of knowledge with individual subject matters. And so we want to figure out exactly where the individual employee's knowledge ends and where their learning opportunity begins. And here is why this is important. Number 1 is we call this lean learning. It is a great way to take the waste out of your learning program. You see, it doesn't do me any good to teach somebody something they already know. The truth of the matter is that is waste. That is wasted money. We are spending money in a training program, paying somebody to train on something they already know. Sadly, most manufacturing training programs do a tremendous amount of that because we've got a group of 10 people in a room all learning the same thing. So the first thing is it makes the learning much more efficient if we can figure out exactly where the individual learner's knowledge ends. The second thing is that we're not insulting their intelligence by making them sit through training on something that they already know. We will lose them, we will lose their interest, and they can turn on the training program if they think that we're wasting their time. So we need to figure out exactly where their knowledge ends and then figure out where the opportunity for learning begins. Because the truth of the matter is, if we don't start where that yellow dot is, if we don't start where the word start is, and we start too far along in the process, in other words, we're teaching people things that maybe they don't have the base understanding or the base level of knowledge to comprehend or appreciate, that is waste as well. Because they're not learning the competencies we want them to learn because they didn't have the prerequisite knowledge that was important for them to have in order to learn that. And the second thing that happens is that if we start them too far along, we frustrate them because we're trying to teach them things that they're not grasping. They become frustrated with the learning. Most of the time, they won't blame themselves. They will blame the e-learning platform. They will blame the training program because it's human nature to push the blame off on something else. Very few employees will say, hey, I don't get this, or I don't think I'm smart enough to do this, or better put, I don't think that my skills and my knowledge are advanced enough for me to be successful at this particular juncture of the learning. They won't say that. They will just give up on the program and they'll turn on the program. So we need to assess, and we can do this electronically, we can do this virtually, we can do this online, exactly where that knowledge ends and where the learning opportunity begins, using what we call a platform called e-assessment, where we're assessing a learner's competencies. This is not a test. We are not testing what they know. We are helping them and helping ourselves figure out exactly where their knowledge is so we can start them at the right pinpoint spot for what they need to learn in a specific subject matter expert. So that is really, really important. We have to figure out where the knowledge ends and where the learning opportunity begins, and we need to have a system and a platform for doing that. We're getting close to the end. Number 9 on our list of 10 in our guide for employing your employee training program is to get training on the LMS. If that's not a term you're familiar with, that is a word that is ubiquitous in the world of education. LMS stands for Learning Management System. Simply put, it is the software that we use for administering the learning program. This is the software where we can enter all of our learners, where they can get a notification that they've been entered into the learning program. This is a software where we can take those custom courses and create them in the software. So when the learner goes into the learning management system, all they see is the specific course that has been assigned to them. This is the software where we track all of their pre-quiz results, all of their post-quiz results, all of their e-assessment results, and we track exactly what courses they have been completing, when they have been completing them, when they have been participating in the learning platform, how they're doing on their hands-on skills. So we can measure that as well through a rubric, and then reporting all that information out. Because training, just like in manufacturing, what gets measured gets managed, what gets measured improves. And if we measure our performance as a company against the goals that we have for our training program, that is the single best way to make sure that we stay the course. That is the single best way to make sure that we don't get distracted by those everyday things that happen in manufacturing: lost parts, late orders, customer concerns about quality, all of those things that are really, really important, but can also take us off the track of a regular disciplined training program. So that is what we do with our learning management system. Somebody needs to learn that. It's typically that administrator that we've already talked about, and somebody needs to teach that. And that is a member of our team that walks through, holds the individual's hand step by step through the LMS, and is available at any time to answer questions if those questions come up. So the final thing that we need to do in deploying our employee training program is get started. Now is the time to get started. We have companies all over the Midwest, all over the country that are initiating and launching employee training programs. Big companies, Fortune 500 companies, companies that are 5 and 10 and $20 billion companies. And yes, we have the companies that are 5 and 10 and 20 employees. And those are the ones that in some ways this training is just as important, if not more important, than it is for the big companies as manufacturing technology changes and as the need for a skilled workforce becomes more and more important in our ability to grow our business, sustain our business, service our customers, and create growth opportunities for our customers and our employees. So number 10 is to start. And here is our graphic. That's what it looks like launching ourselves into the race of employee training. Now, I know it looks a little bit like this guy is just about to nosedive right into the track. And that occurred to me as I was looking at that photograph. But the truth of the matter is, with the right partner by your side, with somebody there to make sure that you stay upright and moving forward full speed, that won't happen. You will get up, you'll get over that first hurdle and every hurdle thereafter as you create your industrial employee learning program. Those are the 10 steps. Don't do it yourself. Your manufacturing operations are unique, but most of the competencies that we need to train are not. We need to choose who on our team is going to get the training, what we need to train them on, pick somebody to administrate the program and build the custom courses, which is number 6. Then we need to figure out when and where we start introducing those hands-on skills opportunities, make sure that we're starting our employees off where their knowledge ends and the learning opportunity begins. Train somebody on that learning management system that we're going to use to oversee the whole program. And most important, get started quickly. Like I said, if you start next Monday, you can be up and running literally next Friday, and we absolutely guarantee that. With that, Melissa, let's turn it over to the audience and find out if we had any questions. I'm sure we did that came from our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And again, to our audience, go ahead and continue to post your questions in that Q&A. We do have a few minutes remaining, so we can get all of your questions locked and loaded here. Matt, the first question that I'm going to pose here is for my entry-level employees who aren't experienced at all in manufacturing, is there some kind of exploratory program for those who are unsure where they might want to end up? Absolutely. And there's a couple different ways that we can do that, Melissa. The first one is actually to come up with a custom program. We did this with a large a company everybody would recognize, a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company in the Midwest, where they wanted to put in an entry-level program for their brand new employees. And they wanted to learn for 2 reasons. Number one, to get a little bit better idea of which part of the business they might be interested in working in. So we gave them a little bit of CNC, we gave them a little bit of fluid power, some electrical systems, electromechanical systems, mechanical drives, an overview on advanced manufacturing, an overview on Industry 4.0, just to give them some great exposure to the types of careers that are available in manufacturing. And then we took it one step further. So we started looking at, okay, for somebody just coming onto the shop floor, should they know how to at least look at a blueprint and know what it is?
Should they know a little bit about advanced manufacturing? Should they understand what a sensor is? Should they understand what a human machine interface is as they're operating equipment? Should they understand a little bit about throughput? Should they understand a little bit about safety and personal protective equipment and so on? Created a custom course around those competencies that employer wanted those new employees to learn. And in their first week of employment, those individuals, in addition to doing the other types of things you do in your first week on the job, got 12 hours of training, exposure, and base manufacturing skills before they were let out onto the shop floor. So benefit of that is you have an employee who is very, very knowledgeable, at least in the entry level and in advanced manufacturing. They know a little bit about the equipment that they're going to see when they go out onto the shop floor. To the questioner's point, they will have a better idea of which types of careers in manufacturing might be appealing to them. And they know that they're working for an employee that is investing in training. They're working for an employer that will invest in their future. And that is a great message to send to somebody in the first week of their new employment.
Absolutely. I love it. That's a great case study and a great example of how we can do that. And I guess along those lines, I think we have time for one more question. And I think this question fits really well with what you were kind of mentioning at the end of your answer there, Matt. But it seems everywhere I drive nowadays, there are now hiring signs and employers cannot find people to fill their open positions. Do you have data or case studies to show that having a training program in place helps employers to find and retain new talent?
Absolutely. And we look at it a couple of ways. The first one is this. There's, first of all, tremendous amounts of information out there that show that employees who know their employers are willing to invest in their future are more likely to go to work for that company and to stay with that company. Believe it or not, there was a study done by Pearson a couple of years ago that said that only 34% of large companies offer direct training to their employees. And would you believe that 1 in 4 employees of manufacturing companies say their employer offers no training, zero training? And so there is a big difference between companies that are providing training to employees and those who are not. And there's tremendous data out there that reflects the fact that if we're investing in the long-term success of our employees and our team members, that will be a great way to attract talent and retain talent. But here's the second piece of that. Is it easier for us to find a machine operator or somebody who is going to load and unload pieces of material onto a machine? Is it easier for us to find an electromechanical technician or somebody who is operating a machine? Is it easier for us to find an automation technician or somebody who is operating a machine? The answer to those questions are the more advanced the skill set, the harder it is for us to find those people. In some cases, we can't find them. Try and find an electromechanical technician, try and find an automation technician today in the world of manufacturing. And it's really, really hard, if not impossible. The only solution to that is for us to take the people that are already working for us. How many people that are working in your manufacturing environment today will still be working there 10 years from now? The vast majority of them, the vast majority of your employees in 10 years are working for you today. So here's the solution. We need to take those people that are in those machine tender positions and upskill them to operators, and then backfill the machine tender position that's easier to find. And then we take the operators and upskill them to technicians and backskill the operator position, which is difficult to find, but easier relatively than finding the electromechanical technician or the automation technician, and so on. So if we create a culture of continually training our people, preparing them to be promoted in the organization, and backfilling them with less skilled people who, by the way, have the exact same opportunity to grow as time goes on, that is a great way for us to build a really robust and responsive and proud workforce. And that can only lead to retention and can only be a benefit in the way that we recruit our people.
Wonderful. Love it. Thank you, Matt. I know that oftentimes we do get so lost in the struggle to find people that we forget about the people that we already have and how we can leverage them for those positions. So thank you for answering those audience questions. I will leave it to you to wrap up today's webinar.
Of course, great questions and great point. And thanks everybody for being with us for another episode of Webinar Wednesday. We've got a great topic queued up for you a week from today, next Wednesday. It's on the topic of metal 3D printing. We have an awesome partner in a company called Exact Metal out of State College, Pennsylvania. They are going to share just a really fascinating case study. They actually had an intern in their business that did a capstone project as they were moving through their education pathway on different materials and different properties of materials. And it's just going to be a great example of how we can take an individual in a training program, take a person in a technical college, take a person at a university, and use really, really cool advanced manufacturing technology, in this case, metal 3D printing, to teach things like materials, strength of materials, strength v strain, and so on. And so we're going to talk all about how we can use that platform across education to create really, really meaningful capstone projects with a real world example, a real world guest, and a real world company to show individuals how this is done. So we're looking forward to having you all back with us a week from today, next Wednesday. As you know, we are here every single Wednesday at 2 o'clock Central. We will see you next week.